So this next part is going to be a little challenging for me to deliver since I'm not in the room. And I know, like, when I'm showing the slides, it's sort of a small pixelated image you can see of me, but so I might have to switch back and forth a little bit between sort of the slides and myself. But I want to talk a little bit about body language, intonation, voice control, and things like that. Then I'm going to go through, so that it's going to be like a relatively rapid overview of the key slides you need to have in your pitch deck and some specific recommendations on the 5 core elements you need to have in every good show pitch. And I'm going to try to expand a little bit on each of those 5 elements. You're then going to have a bit of time to potentially update your own 5-minute show pitch. Hopefully all of you have arrived today ready to deliver a 3 to 5 minutes show pitch and presentation of your startup. If not, you're going to have to work pretty fast. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a live pitch session where we put you together in groups of 3 startups per team. So you get to present to 2 other startups, and you get to hear their presentations and provide feedback to them. So you get feedback from 2 other teams, and you get to give feedback to 2 other teams. So that will be our next sort of good hour, maybe hour and a half or so, where we dive into all of that. And then we'll dive into fundraising, and we can talk more specific around valuations, how that works, how startup financing works in general. We can talk then about startups metrics and what investors look for in terms of growth and how you can present those elements of your business in the best possible way. And then we'll talk about growth hacking as well, also using this growth hacking for Pirates framework. Are you familiar with that framework by Dave McClure from 500 Startups? No? So we'll talk a bit about some of those key things. I mean, you sort of become what you measure, right? So you need to figure out what are the core metrics we are going to measure, because if we don't measure it, it's not going to get done. So how to decide what key features or what key metrics to focus on, and then I'll share some examples of good sort of growth hacks that startups have done successfully, and finally we'll talk a bit more about sort of networking and some of the tactics. So how does that sound for an afternoon?
Good.
Hey! Okay, good. So the first thing here, and I have a couple of video examples of good pitches that I wanted to share with you. And let's do this. So, starting with a couple of do's and don'ts in terms of how to present, what to do, what not to do. Are you still able to see my video? Because I can see you.
Yes, yeah, we can see you.
Yes. Okay, very good. So the first question is here, what actually affects the audience the most, what do you think?
It depends on people, no?
Maybe it depends on people, yeah. But roughly speaking, is it nonverbal communication? Is it intonation and voice? Or is it the actual words you use when you communicate? Like, what do you think people remember the most?
Nonverbal voice and words.
Yes, right? So, of course, these percentages are to be taken with a grain of salt, but roughly speaking, over half of what people actually take away from a presentation is all the nonverbal communication. It's how you handle yourself in the moment when you're speaking to another person. Then you have the voice that you use. How do you use your voice? How powerful is it? How vibrant is it? How energizing and lively is it? And then you have the actual words you use during your presentation. So what we can take away from this is that people don't remember the words you use. They remember the feeling they had during your presentation. That's what people are going to take away, is the feeling they had during your presentation. Did they like you? Did you come across as somebody who's professional, who's likable, who's competent, who's a leader, who has integrity, who has obsession for the product, who has a big grand vision, right? That is the feeling. Like, at the end of the day, investors are also just people. And we make all kinds of irrational decisions all the time. We tend to like to think that we're making decisions in our heads, but that's not how it works. Like, the decision center in the brain is still part of the croc brain. It's very much, affected by emotions, and it's like gut feeling that you have when you meet another person is usually what you're going to go with. And that's also how investors feel. So it is as important, if not more important, that you are able to deliver a presentation using good body language compared to the specific words you use during your presentation. The challenge can, of course, be that if you have English as a second language and you are struggling with the words, you end up spending a lot of mental capacity simply on speaking the words that you have in your script. And that's going to take away a lot of attention and energy from also being present in the moment. And that's going to affect the audience quite a bit. But with that in mind, like, what do you usually spend 90% of the time on when preparing a presentation?
The words, the slide.
The words, right? The script you're going to use, you're refining that. It's like, oh no, it shouldn't be this word, it should be another word. And that's what we spend time on, right, when preparing a speech. But in reality, nobody remembers the actual words in a speech. I mean, maybe you remember like a snippet or a few things, a few descriptions, but generally speaking, other things are as important or more important. So you have to practice the other elements of your pitch as well, not just what you say, but how you say. So a couple of notes on that, right? Most people, when they have to present in front of a large audience, we tend to get nervous. And that is very normal. So you don't have to feel weak or bad about being nervous. Like 75% of people suffer from speech anxiety, right? It's the most normal fear. Actually, there's been a number of surveys indicating that people are more afraid of public speaking than they are of death itself. Right? So at a funeral, if you had to go up and give a speech, like, most people would actually prefer to be the one in the grave instead of having to deliver the speech. It's quite ironic. But it is a major fear for most people. The question is, or the challenge is, how you deal with that anxiety, because the fact is, it can actually be an advantage that you have some nerves. It makes you more interesting for the audience, because the audience can feel some of that tension and some of that anxiety. It creates like an interesting experience for the audience as well. It sort of draws them in. What you need to do is find a way to get those butterflies to fly in formation so it doesn't prevent you from still delivering your presentation. So what typically happens in this situation when you get anxious is that you have this like reverse plumbing syndrome, where what should be wet is now dry. So your mouth that's supposed to be wet and lubricated is now all dry, and what should be dry is all wet. So you start sweating, you have big, wet piles under your armpits, and all that good stuff. Then a lot of people will start having like very shallow breathing because they get nervous. They breathe up here, right, instead of breathing all the way down the belly, and that makes you more nervous. It also prevents you from speaking in a calm and controlled manner. So it's very important to sometimes step up, take a deep breath down in your belly. You can try to take a deep breath right now. Hold it in for a second, and then slowly blow out. And it's quite amazing what kind of control you have over the body just by breathing. It's one of those few bodily functions that you have full control over. And it has phenomenal effects. So how many of you meditate? A few people in the room? Only a couple. Right, so those of you who meditate on a consistent basis, you know how powerful it is to be able to control your mind, to focus on the breath. But also in the speaking scenario, it is incredibly powerful to control your nerves, to control how you feel about this entire experience. And you can do that by focusing on the breath. Breathing all the way down, taking a deep breath. Don't be nervous if you lose your line of thought. Just take a deep breath and you'll get back to it. Okay. So what else can we do to fight this? Well, what we want to do is, since we move you from this to that, right? We want you to be excited to be on the stage, to be excited to enter a networking session. Reality is, of course, that most people hate networking, but now, because we know your network is your net worth, there's no way around it. Like, building a professional network takes a lot of hard work, and unfortunately, the best way to meet people is to be amongst a lot of people, so you do need to get out. What is very important is before you enter that room, a lot of people who suffer from like self-doubt, they struggle with this fact that they have a negative self-image. So they tend to have negative thoughts. They tend to tell themselves that I don't deserve to be in this room. All the other people are smarter than me. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm never going to succeed. And if you have that kind of negative self-talk, it's going to affect the way people look at you. Right? So before you go to that networking meeting or before you get up on stage, it's very important that you have positive self-talk. You talk about how awesome it is that you've gotten to this point, that you deserve this, and that you have as much to offer as anyone else in the room. And what is also important or helpful sometimes to remember is that the audience wants you to succeed. So it can be very scary to be up on a big stage, but try to remember that the audience actually wants you to succeed. So when you look at an audience, some people in the audience suffer from this syndrome called the resting bitch face. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
No?
Yes? So some people suffer from the resting bitch face, and that is essentially that when you're relaxed, you have sort of a moody look on your face. So you just like, when you're relaxed, this is sort of your facial expression. And it just looks like people hate you when they have a resting bitch face. It's not their fault. Maybe they're actually really into the presentation, but their way of showing that they're into the presentation is basically by relaxing their face. And if they have this like resting bitch face, it looks like they're really mad and they hate your guts. Key is to then find those people in the audience who don't have that, who are actually engaged and excited, and then just focus on those people. Because that will give you positive encouragement, and that will boost your confidence, and that will help you basically feel better about the presentation. Another tool you can use if you are nervous about getting on stage is a visualization exercise. So you can look this up online, but the basics are essentially that you try to visualize ahead of the event how it's going to go in great detail. So you close your eyes and you imagine the steps you're going to take. When you get up on stage, you get the clicker in your hand, you look up on their slides, the slides are there, you look at the audience, you smile, you get out, and you just kill it. Right? You deliver a super great presentation. Everyone is standing up, clapping, excited. You get great questions, and you can answer those questions well, and everyone is excited about the presentation that you just delivered. So by having visualized the experience a couple of times, when you actually get to do it, it's like you're not doing it for the first time. You've already done it. And that takes a lot of those nerves out. And not all people need this type of exercise, but those of you who tend to get really nervous, this can actually help quite a bit. Okay. Then the other thing is to smile and be positive. It turns out that you come across as being a lot more likable if you smile and have a positive attitude. Like, nobody goes to a networking event to hear you bitch about your wife and kids, right? That's just not why people go to networking events. So have a positive attitude. This is not the time to vent. And if you smile and have positive energy, that works sort of as a magnet, and everybody will be attracted to that party center of the event. So smile and be positive. Just make sure to check your teeth before you get into the event. And for the gentlemen, make sure that your zipper is up in your pants, and that your shirt is tied in, and things like that. It really sucks, and I speak from experience. If you come home from like a 2-hour networking event and you find out your zipper in your pants have been down the whole time, and your white shirt has been sticking out, it's a very unfortunate feeling. So try not to do that. And then there's an exercise here. Are you guys up for trying something fairly uncomfortable?
Go for it.
Yes? Get a little bit outside of our comfort zone here? Okay, so I don't think I've tried this virtually before, but we're going to give it a shot. So there's a researcher at Harvard University, or she used to be at Harvard University. Her name is Amy Cuddy, and she has also published one of the most seen TED Talks of all time. I think it has over 40 million views, where she talks about this concept of power posing. Have you seen it, any of you?
No.
No? Okay, so the idea of a power pose is that you can sort of trick the mind to become more powerful and have a more powerful appearance if you do a power pose right before entering a job interview or getting on stage to deliver a presentation or right before going into a networking event. If you resume some type of hyper-masculine position for about 30 seconds before you go do that activity, what's going to happen, and you will experience this now, is that you're going to be able to boost your testosterone level and lower your cortisol level. And we're going to talk about what that means. But essentially what I want you to do is stand up with me here for a second. So I'm going to try to see if you can do this. So everybody stand up. Okay. Then what I want you to do is try to slouch over and just have your hands sort of hanging down your sides, like really just slouching over, relax as much as possible. How does that feel? Do you feel like you can conquer the world?
No.
That's too much. Okay, so now is the uncomfortable part, okay? And you're going to try this with me. It's going to be weird, but trust me, it works, okay? So I'm going to look at your faces right now, okay? So let's try this. So you take your hands above your head, okay? And then you snap your fingers like this with me. See if you can actually get it. Okay? And then on the count of 3, I want you to scream as loud as you can, yes, yes, yes. Okay? I told you it was going to be uncomfortable. So let's try this virtual from the United States all the way to Taiwan. 3, 2, 1, yes!
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so right now, if I look closely at the screen here, I can see more smiling faces. I can see a different level of energy. I can see some people who are really uncomfortable. But the fact is that by doing an exercise like this, with arms above your head, with like a strong like Wonder Woman type pose for a while, or sitting in an armchair with your hands above your head and your legs up for a while, you lower your cortisol levels. Like you can sit down again, which is the hormone in your brain that makes you nervous and anxious and depressed, right? And you boost your testosterone level, the hormone, the masculine hormone that makes you go kill an animal, right? You're ready to attack. You're ready to go conquer the world. You feel this boost of confidence, and what the research found was that you can be up to 30% more convincing if you've done some type of power pose before getting on stage or entering a job interview. 30%, that's insane. Right? So I'm not saying that it's exactly 30% for you, but reality is if you do some kind of combination before getting up on stage of positive self-talk, right? So positive reassurance, positive thoughts, and then you give yourself a little boost, right? Whatever one you prefer, if it's like the yes, yes, yes one, or it's like the Wonder Woman, or just hands above your head, it will give you a sort of a feeling of excitement, and the audience can actually sense that. So it sounds pretty silly, but the research is there to validate that this actually has an effect. So I recommend you try it out. There's one little caveat to this, that I highly recommend you make sure if you're speaking on a big stage that you're actually behind the curtain when you're doing this, that the audience can't see you, and that your microphone is turned off. Otherwise, it has a very different effect on the audience. I speak from experience. So that was the power pose here. Yes. So the fact is, the body talks whether we want it or not. The position, you need to have some kind of body readiness, right? No slouching. You need to have shoulders back, right? You're proud of what you're presenting. It doesn't have to go full on Arnold Schwarzenegger, but stand up straight, right? Like feel like a wire is pulling up your chest. You're proud of what you're presenting, of who you are. You have good eye contact with people. You use the space in a good way. Don't be pacing back and forth on the stage. That's very distracting as well. But you can use the room, right? You can go out, go close to the audience, find a new place to stand, and then you can go back to wherever you are. Don't stand behind a podium, if at all possible, right? It's much better to have a lapel microphone or a wearable microphone behind your ear or something like that. And it really makes a difference how it's delivered. Then we have a beautiful old grandma here. I actually attended an event in Moscow once where they had this like picture grandma session. It was pretty cool. So they actually had this like 85-year-old grandma sit up on stage, and she was knitting while being on stage, and then these young entrepreneurs had to go up and try to pitch to grandma, which was quite difficult. And she would be like sitting there just shooting down their terrible ideas. But the point with this slide is that you need to be able to explain your idea in such simple terms that grandma and grandpa will be able to get it. But you do not come across as a smarter person just because you can use complex vocabulary. It only makes you create more distance between you and the audience, and it makes you less likable. So there's been a lot of research on this. Just use simple words, easy to understand, and don't assume that the investors know about your industry. Right? This is another common mistake that entrepreneurs make, because this is your universe, this is your world. Right? You know everything about this problem, you know everything about the solution, and for you it's so obvious that this is the right path. But for everyone else, they've never heard about this before. So you need to start with the basics and explain it in simple terms, using normal vocabulary, no industry-specific terms. That's going to get you much further. Okay, so good posture, fewer slides, fewer words. That's one thing we're definitely going to hammer home now. And use your hands in a positive way. Don't pace, but you can move around. And then smile, be positive. Okay, do you guys want to see a couple of pitch examples? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alrighty, let's see. So the first one here is pretty fun. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do exactly this. Nonetheless, it's a pretty captivating way of delivering a pitch. So check this out here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm so stressed out trying to plan all of life's celebrations. I mean, I got little Susie's graduation, I got Ted's birthday party, and of course, football season is coming back. I want to plan a tailgating party for that. I wish there was one easy solution for me to order all my party supplies, just as easy as booking an Airbnb. Wait, there is. Party on Demand is your one-stop mobile party supply shop, delivering the party to you in 1 hour or less. We deliver the 3 essential ingredients you need to wow your guests and have an incredible, memorable party. We deliver food, talent, and decorations right to your door. Bam! We make it happen easily with our partnerships from Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Postmates, delivering that tantalizing food that's yummy, yummy in your tummy. In addition to that, our friends over at Amazon Prime are hooking it up with our great, crazy curated party box that's delivered to your door. Plus, we have hooked up over 1,500 incredible talents of dancers, acrobatics, and even your own personal chef from Benihana. That's it. It all starts with the box. Party on Demand is already partnered with over 35 of the world's largest companies and brands that's going to give you the cool thing. Think of Pinterest meets Etsy, deliver in your box and all exclusive right to your door. Oh man, it's going down. Our app is simple and easy to use. And in less than 5 clicks from your phone, your your party is on. With over $251 billion in its licensing and rental industry, we know we're going to disrupt this marketplace because over 800,000 people celebrate their birthday in the U.S. alone every single day, not including over 500,000 people that just have a great social and celebration as well. With that, Party on Demand situates ourselves between the sweet spot of affordability and convenience. Now, our revenue model was simple. Nowhere, I mean nowhere, can you find food, talent, and decor delivered to your door same day for the incredible price. Wait for it, $299. Ow! Make you want to shake something. We're asking for $1.5 million in exchange for 15% equity. This will give us a 15-month runway and yield approximately about $7.5 million. Party on Demand was inspired by my father, who passed away from cancer. But before he did, he said, son, celebrate life more often. Whether that's your job promotion, or getting an A on a test, or even crossing the street, celebrate life every single day. Now you don't have to stress no more, or wonder how to put on a really cool party and impress your friends. We can do it for you. I'm Big Willie G, the CEO of Party on Demand, and we're helping you, and your best friend sitting next to you to party on. So call us, and I'll see you at the party. Woo!
All right, what do you think about that?
He's a machine.
Who's going to deliver the Big Willie G pitch today? Nobody's up with that. Yeah, no, he's quite a character, right? But if we look at sort of distilling that, or sort of dissecting that pitch a little bit, did that seem credible to you?
Yeah.
The apple of a pitch.
The pitch or the product?
Well, the way he presented his startup, right, was that I'm trying for us to extract some insights from these pitches, some of the things we liked, some of the things we don't like. And of course, it's a personal style, and not everyone, like, I would say very few people can go out and deliver that kind of pitch, right, in a genuine fashion. And that's not to say that you have to do it this way or another, but there are certain things we can learn from each of these pitches. And any sort of thoughts on this? Were there things you liked and that you didn't like about the way he presented his business?
His style was on brand for what he was selling. I mean, he was a party, right?
Yeah. So if this was a new type of banking service, he might have to make a few adjustments. You mean, or
yeah. If it's a different audience, different function, it would be different. But he also he gave his why right at the end. I think it maybe could have been earlier, but it was a very powerful why.
Yeah. Yeah. So he sort of ended up with that personal story, and that created a really nice sort of final touch to it. Absolutely.
I think his style is like to selling a product. That's because we do pitch. Sometimes it's selling for our company, but I'm not sure it's a good style for selling a company, because if you're selling products, you will very excited and very just like this guy. But if you're selling your company, that's, I think, maybe doing more relaxed and a more comfortable term to selling your company and yourself.
Yeah. So you mean like certain investors might be turned off by the fact that he's so over the top energetic?
Yeah, and at some point it sounded a bit like a commercial to me. So I feel like I'm watching a TV commercial, and that's TV commercial like a lot. I used to be in marketing, so I know, but and also that's maybe. I wanted your point of view on that. For me, he was speaking very fast. It was hard to understand because I'm not like natural English speaker. So, but for you neither, but you speak perfectly. You've been in US so long. Does it sound like understandable for you at this thing?
Yeah. No, it did. But I totally understand that, and that is a factor as well. Like if he was pitching to like non-native English speakers, he should definitely slow down a bit. But it's not uncommon for these demo day pitches to be fairly rapid. You will see a couple of different versions today, But in order for you to pack as much valuable information into those 3 to 5 minutes, it has to be relatively fast.
So there's something in the video that you sent, before today to guide us toward the pitch that you wanted to see, which relate to this is clearly this guy, first and foremost, is talking like he's talking to consumers. I think you mentioned that, explaining that first we have to detail how does the product work and talk in a way like this. He does not feel like he is the owner of a company talking to an investor. He feels like he's explaining the product instead. Can you perhaps?
Did you capture the market data, because it's actually in there, and he actually included quite a lot of market data in terms of the size of the market, in terms of the number of partnerships they have, in terms of the amount of traction they already have. It's actually relatively impressive. And I checked out on this company, and they're actually doing quite well. So the information was there, but I agree that it's sort of like I would say like an either you love this guy and you would love to be on his advisory board because that's going to be a crazy party every time, or you feel like this is way over the top. Right? But it was a great first comment somebody made, that it was very related to this particular industry, that he could be a good spokesperson for that, right? Because clearly he has a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and it's very relatable for this particular market. Yeah, should we try? Let's try to see something in a completely different ballpark. And what I'd like you to focus on is the style they're using when presenting, but also try to look at the slides, the way they focus the slides, because they're typically very clean. One very essential element per slide, one key message per slide, large font size, generally speaking, and that is one of the things that we'll dive into afterwards when talking a little bit about slide structure and things like that. So you could also comment on that, and then the actual data that they use to that they choose to include. So let's see here.
Get at me, please. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Open Sponsorship. Put your flags up in the sky. And side to side, side to side. Show the world where you're from. Show the world where you're.
Hi, I'm Ishvin Anand, CEO, Open Sponsorship. 14% of all marketing spend in North America goes to sponsorship. That's a whopping $60 billion industry, and it's all offline. Well, we are changing things up. We're bringing it online, we're democratizing access, and we're growing the industry. Since November, we've hit 1.7 million in GMV. In April, we did 42,000 in net revenue. That's from subscription from brands and commission on deals. So I used to be a sports agent. One of my gigs was commercial director of the Indian Open. I'm talking to the marquee golfer, Robert Rock. So he has a Nike deal. Of course, everyone has a Nike deal. But the rest of him is empty. For him, that's a loss of nearly $500,000. And for brands who work with him, that's a loss too. They would love to be working with Robert, but they just don't know how to get in touch. So we understand the problem, but what's the solution? It's not more middlemen. It's not even agencies with a nice website. It's a true two-sided marketplace with functionality and technology. Brands work with us because we help them understand who they should be working with, what they should be buying, and how much they should be paying. We connect them to over 1,700 amazing athletes on our platform today. Names like Richard Sherman, Russell Westbrook, and over 200 Olympians. We have athletes covering 50 countries, and we haven't even tried to be global. And it doesn't stop with the athlete. Teams, leagues, events, other verticals, music, entertainment, esports, they all rely on sponsorship but suffer from its inefficiencies. We are solving it for everyone. Our team has deep industry experience in sports and in technology. And with a CTO who's a scratch golfer, I really think we have the winning team. So if you want to be part of the future of sponsorship, then find the table where the deals are really getting done. Thank you.
All right, any thoughts on that? It was a very different style.
It's amazingly concise.
Yeah.
It's like she
Very concise
doesn't
and-
say a word that is not necessary.
No. And that's what you'll find, and actually that's one of the feedback points I wrote down after watching your video pitches, is that most of you who are not native English speakers will benefit tremendously from writing out the script of your entire pitch and then rehearsing it like you would rehearse a TED Talk. Because you just don't have time for fluff. You don't have time to for explanations that don't work, or additional examples that are unnecessary and things like that. So, I've worked with many entrepreneurs that come to the Bay Area here, and they're here to network. So they actually have 3 or 4 different versions of their script, sometimes more. They have the 30-second script. They have a 90-second script. They have a 3-minute script. They have a 5 and a 10-minute script. So they know if I have a little extra time, then I'm going to include this. If I have more time, I'm going to share this example. Right? So they have exactly found out and analyzed. These are the things I want to highlight. This is the things I want people to remember and to take away from my presentation. And they have A/B tested their script with people too. And I know this is going to an extreme, but the fact of the matter is, it does make an impact on how people perceive your presentation. What do you think of her slides?
It's also very simple, and there's clearly, like, you see one picture out of maybe 3 or 4 points that she made. So clearly it will be difficult to choose what to present, what to show.
Yeah, true. What did you take away? What is the image that's stuck in your mind?
Number.
The golfer?
A lot of number. All of the number.
Numbers, yeah. And numbers typically build credibility. People rely on numbers. People are scared of numbers. So sometimes having some real facts and quantifying your growth, quantifying user retention, quantifying how your people love your products can be a pretty powerful technique.
Compared to the guy before?
For me, it was definitely that growth, the traction growth, right?
Compared
Compared
to the guy before, it seems to be a much more company-to-company conversation rather than company-to-consumer. She doesn't describe nearly as much the actual process of using the product.
No, she didn't. Yeah, she sort of assumed that people got that from that. And then she just spent quite a bit of time on building credibility as well, right? If we look at what investors care about, low risk, high return, right? So she talked about the enormous markets, she talked about the numbers here, she talked about the amount of athletes they're already working with, over 200 Olympians. And then she spent a lot of time on the brands, right, that they're already working with. She talked about her own credibility with her industry experience and her partner's industry experience, and then the current traction. So those are some key points that helps assure the audience that these people know what they're talking about.
What is the purpose of the 2 different strategy here between detailing as if you're talking to consumer or being much more credibility oriented?
Well, so I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the others. I'm trying to show you a couple of examples of different styles and different things that you can take from this and that. I mean, the first presentation is a bit gimmicky for my taste as well. But for this particular business, I thought it actually worked fairly well. Maybe you could have turned it down a notch, but I think it was very memorable. And I assure you, everyone wants to come over and talk to Big Willie G, right? Because he has so much personality, and that is also that's not to be underestimated, right? The the opposite could be, actually I have one I want to show you with a very different, a different sort of attitude. And I'd love to see sort of what you think about that. So let's watch one more and then we'll dive into something else.
Please welcome to the stage, Ethic.
Hi, I'm Jay. We're Ethic. We're bringing sustainable investing to the mainstream. Right now, there's $2.5 trillion passively invested in the market. That's your money. That's your investments, your retirement, that's your children's future. But where is that money being invested on your behalf? That money is in companies like Chevron, Philip Morris, and Smith & Wesson. Not only do companies like this poison people and the planet, they're poisoning your returns. Because the stocks of sustainable companies tend to outperform their less sustainable counterparts by 4.8% annually. Why do we know this? We manage billions of dollars for the most sophisticated investors in the world. We built product and technology for guys like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Deutsche Bank. And what these guys recognize is that the future of investing is sustainable investing. That's why in just 4 years, they have doubled their amount of sustainable investments to $6.6 trillion. This is not a niche, this is a movement, and Ethic brings that movement to the mainstream. We build you a diversified portfolio of low-cost, responsible funds based on your individual needs and values. We are fully registered with the SEC, and our private beta is already live. You see, in the future, there won't be a distinction between traditional investing and sustainable investing. There will only be sustainable investing, and if you are interested in a sustainable future, come find me afterwards. If not, you're probably a bad person.
Alright. Thoughts on this?
I thought it was interesting that all the way he was very serious and kind of not boring, but I wouldn't rely to the guy. I was like, he may have a point, but he's not friendly and anything. And at the very end, he got this joke that may change the feeling about him. I'm still not sure if he's a nice guy, but still, I think it was a nice way to end it.
So at the end of the pitch, do you have a good impression of him, or?
Yeah, but much better impression. But
Yeah.
I'm still not sure, like, if it did it just for the sake of it, or if it's really like cool and nice. But it was a nice way to end his speech.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
There is a point to this because most of the pitch is driven around the idea of urgency and morality in some way, which are topics that are difficult to bring in.
I think I don't know what product he do actually, even though I try to figure out what product he do. So that I think it is not precise enough if we do a company presentation.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling is that he spent a lot of time sort of lecturing and in a very sort of semi-arrogant way portraying his view of the world and what values you should have. It's sort of like in a very, I just don't know how to describe that, but I don't like the feeling you sort of sit back with while listening to that. He definitely does not come across as particularly coachable or a particularly sort of friendly person. but he does some things around, mentioning the banks they worked for before us and the current, the numbers of the industry and all that stuff, like builds some level of credibility, but this was like a stark contrast to Big Willie G, right? That is all about humor and approachable and likable, whereas this guy comes across as very sort of uptight, semi-arrogant, right? So.
But that's also one of the points. Like, for example, the first guy, I would want to go party with him and be his friends, but maybe won't be sure to invest in his company. The second guy is not likable, but I will be like, okay, maybe have a point there, and maybe on the company side and investment side, there is something to think about.
It's almost, it's almost like each pitch is tailored to the actual industry. Fun guy for the party, woman with credibility for perhaps the sponsorship lacks credibility in the industry, this issue. And finally, what you're saying, the moral and responsible guy for your financial investment.
Yeah, so that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes you see like a complete misfit and like people who have screwed it up. But one of the points here is that it's so important what kind of style you use when presenting your company, and of course it has to be authentic, but you can definitely tailor it to be related to your industry and the product you're talking about, but also to the audience. So you tailor your pitch, your elevator pitch, your show pitch is different depending on who you're talking to. Right? So one of the key aspects when presenting to investors is that you need to have done your homework so you know what are the connection points with these investors. And it's so useful that now you have LinkedIn, you can actually stalk people quite a lot. So you know what people you have in common, you know what kind of sports people likes, you know what college they went to, you can find out some of those interests and see if you can find some connection points that you have in common with these people. Because that is a great conversation starter. Okay, do you guys need a 5-minute break, or are you good to power through a little longer? No, we can take 5.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You're tough. All right. Good.
Do you need a 5-minute break?
I have nothing to do. There's the family is asleep. It's dark outside. It's 11 here. So I'm good to go.
Should you want to go howl at the moon? It's California after all.
That's over now. That's at 8 p.m. You get locked up if you start doing it at this point. Okay, so I wanted to still the startup pitch, and particularly to talk a little bit about the pitch deck. So the structure can vary a little bit, but these are usually the slides that you need to include in your investment pitch. And some of you have already done this. You have probably a great looking deck. For some people, some of this might be new, but these are typically the points that everyone agrees on. The first slide is very important, that is enticing. It's like when you go on a first date, like the first 30 seconds is really where you decide whether you want to be with this person or not, right? For an investor, it's also a long-term relationship that they're about to enter into, and your gut feeling is quite important. So the first slide, the first 30 seconds of your pitch has to just be super sharp. This is where you get people excited to hear more, or this is where you see the investors picking out their phones and start texting. Right? Typically, when we listen to a pitch, within the first 30 to 90 seconds, you sort of already know if you're going to invest or not. And then you're just waiting for this entrepreneur to be done presenting so you can move on with your day. Right? So very important to have a very strong, very well-rehearsed, exciting sort of start of your pitch, and ideally use an element of this opening sentence that you just practiced, so that we from the get-go, like, understand what are you doing, who are you targeting, what is the unique aspect of this, right? Get us hooked from the very beginning. Then I highly recommend you focus on the problem, unless you have a ton of traction. If you have a ton of traction, you can lead with traction, okay? But if you don't have a ton of traction, this is the best thing to start with. Like, explain the problem to us. Why is this a problem? Why should I care about it? How is this problem affecting people's lives today? Like, make me care at an emotional level about this problem. Okay? Use one specific customer example. Tell me a story. Show me why this is real. When you've got me hooked about the problem, and then I want to hear about the solution. How are you solving it? Not 1,500 different features. What is the one feature everyone will rave about and everyone will care about? How are you solving the problem? Good. How big is the market? Why? It better be $1 billion market if you're asking for venture capital, right? So big market that is that you can access somehow. That you can hint at a go-to-market strategy as well. Then traction or validation. If you like pre-launch, you can talk about how you validated the need, like how have you done your homework to make sure that this is a real need in the marketplace. And talk about your revenue model. Don't make this too complex. Complex revenue models rarely work. So what is the way to make money? Not that you have to be profitable tomorrow, but ideally hint at some way of at least reaching a good amount of revenue. If there's strong competition, don't hide it. Just get it out there. Show us the competitive landscape and how you're better. And you better be 10 times better than the competition. Otherwise, you're not worth paying attention to. So tell us why you are 10 times better than all the existing products in the market. Marketing and growth strategy. Who are the rock stars on the team? Highlight previous accomplishments, relevant experience working together. And then you can share some of the financials. Don't share too many financials in a deck that you send out, but you can share financials. I mean, if it's disclosable, that's perfectly fine. And then if you have an ask, this could also be included sort of as a backup slide. Any questions about this?
Financial for you is like business plan for 3 years, or it's something else? What financial would you like to see as an investor?
Well, sorry, just do you have that microphone?
What info do you put in the financial? How much do you put?
So
it's like 3 years business plan you want to see, or is something else, or as an investor, what is a good financial slide for you?
I have a couple of examples that I'm not showing now, but it could be like key sort of metrics that you're tracking and your traction to date, but also on the financials it could also be what have you raised to date. And what is your burn rate and runway, and what are you? Yeah, and then under investment, ask for what you need. And you don't need in the presentation before you heard I'm asking for $1.5 million in exchange for 15%. Like, you don't need to put a percentage on. Obviously, that is to be agreed upon later on, but it's a good idea to have sort of a ballpark number that what are you hoping to raise. And also maybe a timeline. The biggest thing that drives investors is the fear of missing out. We'll talk more about that later. But instilling some sense of urgency and a deadline for closing your round is really, really important. That is how you raise a big round, is to get everyone to come to the table at the same time. Because as we talked about before, like, investors are never going to say no unless they feel like they're going to. But what will drive an investor to come and say yes is if the entrepreneur has a timeline, and then we can actually act very fast. Like, when you ask investors, they will say, oh, we need like a month and a half to do due diligence and blah, blah, blah. But if you're like, well, we have a ton of traction, we're closing next week, trust me, we can get it done in a week. So that's just 2 cents on that. Did that answer your questions on the financials? I'll show some examples too.
Yeah.
So when you're presenting, of course, be visual. Like, don't put too much text on your slides, and certainly don't talk to your slides. And if you follow this simple rule, you're never going to make this mistake. The rule is don't put more than 20 words on per slide. So no more than 20 words per slide, and that is essentially one headline and maybe one subtitle. That's it. And if you're using some kind of graph, only have like one graph per slide. A golden rule here could be the 5-second rule. I forgot who came up with this. It's like a famous Vino Kostler. Vino Kostler from I think Sun Microsystems, something like that. Kostler Ventures now. He has this 5-second rule that he will show a slide for 5 seconds to an audience, and then he'll take it down and he'll ask people what there was on that slide. And if they can't explain it, there's too much crap on that slide. Right? So the 5-second rule is a good reminder for all of you. Just don't make slides too complicated. And I cannot emphasize this enough. It's really important. If you put a lot of text, a lot of details on a slide, and you pack it with like multiple different sections, you are forcing the audience to choose between listening to you and trying to understand the slide. And you're going to lose that battle because people are so curious. They want to understand what that complicated graphic element means. So they're going to basically spend the next minute and a half just trying to read the slide and the tiny text you put on the slide. And at the end of the day, slides don't raise money, you do. So you want people to pay attention to you instead of the slides. The slides are just your support. And therefore, the audience, they're not your speaker notes. If you need speaker notes, have them in your hand, right? Have a little notepad with speaker notes, tattoo them on your arm, but whatever you do, don't put your speaker notes on the slides. The slides are for the audience. If you want to have, typically entrepreneurs will have two versions of their slide deck. They have a self-explanatory version that you can send to an investor in advance. And that version of your deck can have more text because it is meant to be a standalone. But the deck that you use when you're presenting should never have more than 20 words per slide. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to break my rule here almost immediately. So Guy Kawasaki, one of the early evangelists at Apple, and a semi-successful, or pretty successful venture capitalist, has this 10-20-30 rule. So 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 plus font size. So don't use anything less than 30 point font. And essentially, there's another rule, basically, like look at the oldest guy in the room, divide his or her age by 2, and that should be the minimum font size, right? So, but just like, if you follow the rule of no more than 20 words per slide, you're going to be fine. So, when delivering a pitch, there are 5 elements that you need to include in every show pitch. And that is problem, solution, market, business model, and what is the last one?
Team.
Team. Thank you. So, get me hooked by explaining the problem. Then you show me a solution that's going to blow me away, and then you tell me how big the market is. You show me how you're going to make money, and you show me who are the rock stars on your team. If you hit these 5 core elements in your show pitch, you are very well on your way. Right? That is a very good start, so that is really what you want to focus on. So I'm going to just go through these very briefly, and then you'll have some chance to basically briefly update your 5-minute pitch, and then you get to delivery. So that is the plan. When you explain the problem, every entrepreneur has to fall in love with the problem he or she is solving. Right? It is initially not so much about the solution, it's all about the problem. Understand your customer, get into the mindset of your user, live a day in the life of your customer. To fully immerse yourself in this context, you've got to understand it like nobody else. So I need to get the sense that you are obsessed with this problem and you want to help these people in a genuine way. What can be helpful is to describe the problem, describe the pain point, exemplify that by a specific user story. How are they affected by this pain point? Right? How does that affect their everyday lives? And if you're not like solving world hunger or some like really like imminent big problem, you can utilize some of the trends that might be going on at the time and talk about how your product is playing well with some of the current societal trends and why that is relevant. So, for example, you could argue that the iPod was not a particular sort of life-changing type of thing that everyone had to have because we had this problem, but it was very much relevant to this trend that people wanted to carry their music with them. And there was not really a good solution that could do that for them. So you could use a trend to underline the urgency of that. When you're explaining the problem, the best way I've seen that done is through storytelling. We have, as human beings, been trained over thousands of years to listen to stories. People hate pictures, but they love stories. So if you can wrap a powerful story, ideally a personal one, that explains your connection to this problem and that explains why people are affected by this problem today, how it's impacting their lives, in a way that gets me connected to that at an emotional level, ideally with some kind of tension, right? Because that builds excitement. And then you're going to get everyone hooked. And now people want to hear about your app or your web service or your hardware product, whatever it is. But use storytelling. It's incredibly powerful. It makes it a lot more memorable. When you talk about a solution, show me, don't tell me, right? A lot of demo days don't even want to have you see your pitch if you don't do a demo. Be careful, however, with live demos. They can definitely go wrong if it's not working. It was pretty impressive with the DB or DB, the 3D 360 camera company. You did a great live demo in your video pitch. That was pretty impressive. So if you know your technology is 100% reliable, you can do a live demo. But generally speaking, you got to be very careful because usually it goes bad. But showcase why your solution is 10 times better than anything else. Demonstrate that by showing us your product. And then there's a very key point here, and that is to translate the features of your product into benefits for the user. So there are so many entrepreneurs who make this mistake that when they talk about the product, they talk about all the specific features of the product, right? All the different things that it can do. But I don't want to know what it can do. I want to know why it does what it does, right? So I want to hear what is the value that the user gets from that feature. So translate your features into benefits, and it will be a lot more convincing. Then you have, is this shared also? So there are many different ways of doing a demo. It could be a software demo, it could be a video recording. You were a little bit past the cardboard and tape stage, but otherwise that works as well. Famous sentence from Steve Jobs when he presented the iPod. Do you remember what was the tagline for the iPod?
1,000 songs in your pocket.
What was the sort of the unique selling proposition there? Nobody remembers? Was it 5.12 gigabytes of music?
Nope. 1,000 songs in your pocket.
1,000 songs in your pocket. Virtual high five. Right? Yes, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Something everyone can relate to. Everyone can understand it. And this is a great example of a feature translated into a benefit, right? Golden rule is features tell, benefits sell. So you want to have benefits in your pitch, not just features. When describing your market, be very clear on who you're targeting. We as investors want to know exactly that you know who you're targeting and why you're going after that specific demographic. How you're going to reach them, how big is that market, what are the advantages, well, that you have over everyone else. Ooh, sorry. Yeah, so you can use this TAM, SAM, SUM model. It's relatively popular. If you're familiar with that, total available market, serviceable addressable market, and target market. So Airbnb, for example, here listed in the early deck, like number of trips that are booked worldwide is roughly 2 billion. Out of those, this is total available market, right? So serviceable available market is 532 million budget and online trips, and out of that, they estimated an initial target market of 10.6 million. So this gives you an idea of number of trips in this case. You can also have number of users in TAM, SAM, SUM. And you can have revenue potential in TAM, SAM, SUM, right? But if we see these numbers, now we can start going into like a back of a napkin type bottom-up calculation, saying, okay, if there's in our budget and online trips 532 million trips every year, and each of those trips is an average of 3 nights, and the average price per night is $80, and we get a 15% commission on each night, now we can make that calculation, right? And here's a fictional like startup for auto detailing, where they come out and they clean your car in your garage. And here's an example of TAM, SAM, and SUM, but instead of number of users, it's revenue potential in TAM, SAM, SUM. Another very important factor, of course, when you're describing your market is the compound annual growth rate, right? So is the market growing or declining? Because you can get away with having a smaller market as long as it's growing really fast. For example, virtual reality or 3D printing a couple of years ago, or you know, right now, I guess certain specific grade masks and things like that, right? So if the market's not that big but it's growing really fast, that could also be a good thing to. And then,
sorry.
What do you want to see? Yeah.
Would you have anything to share about the evaluation of your own market share? Like, what have you seen in your experience that is good, that is bad? Any rule of thumb?
Like an estimated market share?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah. For an early stage company, that is, you know, as long as the market has to be really big, I would say the initial sort of target market, like the serviceable TAM, SAM, SUM, like the serviceable obtainable market, the target market, and the smallest one of the circles, is typically around 5% or so of TAM.
5% of TAM. Thank you.
It varies, but that's if you say 25, I call bullshit, right? So sometimes it's even more. Okay. Okay. So another very important slide that we like to see is that you can do a top-down, but also a bottom-up calculation of your market. Because this gives us a lot more insight into how you're thinking about this, that it's not just 3 numbers on a slide, you can actually break it down for us. So a top-down market calculation is when you're relying on some type of reputable source, like a research agency, and you can buy these like market research reports from a number of different places, and you can just take that number, and that gives us some rough number. But what is way more valuable is when companies do a bottom-up calculation. So Zap Meals here is like a takeout order delivery type service. And they've done a bottom-up calculation here that 100 million people eat out every day. 4% of those meals are ordered online today, but in 5 years, 20% of those meals are going to be ordered online. So that would be 20 million a day. Average takeout order size is $12. So here we can see the available market today is 50 million daily, in the future 250 million daily, right? So that gives us a better sort of insight into, okay, what are the unit economics here, how they calculate You can have some kind of matrix where you're positioning yourself to address the gap in the market if you're looking at your competitors. If you're listing your competitors like this, again, some people like to have this like matrix where you're listing all the features of your competitors, and then you have your company listed that take all the features. But be careful with that, because again, we're looking for companies that are 10 times better than all the competitors. And if your competitors have pretty much all the same features that you have, just in a different mix, it doesn't make you look like you're 10 times better. So if you want to have that comparison, it's fine, but I recommend putting it in an appendix so you can pull it out if people want to ask specifically about how you compare to competitors. Show me the money. So revenue model, right? What is that graph that goes up and to the right? We want to see some kind of exponential growth, hopefully in the future. And here is a simple business model from Airbnb. They take 10% commission on every transaction. So they're breaking that down. Simple, easy to understand. Here's our car detailing service. They charge 15% transaction fee. Each car detailing job is $75. 63 goes to the detailer, 11.25 to cleaner. Right? So very clean, very easy to understand. At the end of your presentation, it's great to highlight your achievements and milestones to date, and then show us where the money is going to be used. Like, where is this going to get you? Are we going to get to profitability, or are we going to get to when is the next race going to happen, and what are the things you're going to be able to prove at that point? Usually people ask for, and we'll talk more about this on the fundraising, but ask for 15 to 12 to 18 months of runway. Like, that's how much you want to raise. You don't want to raise much more because your valuation is hopefully going to go up in the future, so you don't want to keep too much equity out at a lower valuation today. And on the flip side, you don't want to be fundraising all the time because it is extremely time consuming. So that's why you don't want to raise too little. Okay. So here's a way to show some, financials, right? So show traction, revenue growth month over month. You could show a specific month here in terms of users, jobs done. So this is like auto detailing service. So this could also be like units shipped, gross revenue, cleaner revenue, and you can have an LTV over CAC calculation if you like. Yeah? Is there a question? No?
Yeah, sorry. Regarding your previous slide, so you talk about 12 to 18 months of runway. That's for startups that are not profitable. What kind of rule of thumb do you have for companies that are already profitable?
If you're already profitable, yes, so you're racing, but you're probably racing to expand, right, in a specific area. So you gotta, you should be able to fairly specifically explain what you're going to be able to grow into, where you're going to be if you get this capital, right?
But what's a reasonable ask? What kind of number? Like, is it, a multiple of revenue? Is it?
No, it's depending on what you need, right, for your growth market. If you've already proven that you have a lifetime value, an LTV over CAC that is 3 or more, then it's all about just pouring fuel on the fire so you can expand, right? So if you've proven the model and you know you can turn additional venture capital into more money, then, I guess the question is, if it's so proven, why don't you go take a bank loan? Why do you want to finance it with equity? But, yeah.
And the answer is Taiwan.
Okay, there you go. Okay, well, so in the case, no, it's not depending on your revenue, it's depending on the investment case.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's such a certain model, I'd probably also consider other alternative types of financing instead of venture financing. If it's simply a matter of expansion to a new building and you can show there's a good ROI on that, then it should be possible to raise from also different types of investors.
Thank you.
Like real estate investments. Right? Right. So I'm almost done here, and then we're going to dive into getting you to work again. I'm sorry, this is a little long. Usually this is like a 2-day workshop, so we're compressing it into one, so it's a little intense on the slides. So these are some key metrics, and I think we'll dive into this a little bit more when we talk about fundraising and what key metrics you are currently tracking. I'm very curious to hear what that is, but some of the most essential ones here is definitely LTV, so customer lifetime value, or lifetime value per customer, and then customer acquisition cost. Right? Those are the gold numbers you need to know for your business. CAC, what does it cost you to acquire one new customer, and what is the lifetime value of that customer? So over the lifetime of that customer, how much profits will you be able to harvest from that customer? And the other things we'll talk about later. Yeah, so this is getting boring, so I included a crazy cat. So actually on the Miro board I've included, because there are so many metrics out there and it can be a little confusing, so I actually included at the bottom right on the board, you can see here I included an overview of a ton of different metrics. So you can play around with that, and there's a simple explanation of what all these acronyms actually mean. So what is CAC, what is MAU, what is CMGR, like all these different acronyms that people use, so that might be useful. I have a link to this as well. So, but yeah, at some point I'd love you to describe what are the metrics you're currently tracking, and also what platforms do you like using to track some of these metrics. So that would be interesting to just share that across all the servers. Okay, final 2 cents, and then we'll get to work. Yeah, so unit economics, I think we'll talk about this under fundraising, because usually you wouldn't have a slide like this in your pitch deck, maybe as an appendix. But this is something you want to have as an appendix if it comes up in the investment conversation. You can actually show the specific unit economics and then the calculation that highlights customer lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, and sort of breaks that down. And this LTV over CAC ratio, for those of you not familiar with that, is that it's great to have a lifetime value that is at least 3 times higher than the customer acquisition cost. It really depends on the industry. It really depends on the type of product you're dealing with, and your cash flow projections and all that stuff. But generally speaking, that's a healthy business if you can show at least 3 times lifetime value over customer acquisition cost. Obviously, if it costs you more money to get one new customer, then what you're going to make off of that customer, that's a bad business. And that's what, in the .com area, we tried to just make that up on volume, and that didn't go so well. So, building the right team, the last thing, we want to see some real rock stars on the team, highlight the core skills of team members, key accomplishments. If you have previous success, that builds a lot of credibility, work experience at reputable companies, experience working together, credible advisors, investors. So if you have some really credible investors, that also helps you quite a lot, because then we know as investors that those investors have definitely done their due diligence, although that's not always true. But there's a lot of herd mentality amongst investors. So if a reputable firm has already invested, everyone jumps in and wants to invest as well. Really think about building credibility. Everything you share about the team should be about building credibility. So some kind of good mix. This is a slide more from Jake McClure. But yeah, you want to have hackers, hustlers, and artists, right? Or geeks, and then entrepreneurs and sales marketing people. Okay. When it comes to becoming a good presenter, there's only one way to become really good, and that is by practicing, and ideally by video recording yourself. So what we're going to do now is that you're going to have a couple minutes to update your pitch decks. You'll be able to bring a laptop. I'm not sure if you have a slide deck you want to use for a 5-minute presentation, but you can. Try to make those slides as simple and easy to read as possible. If you have more than 20 words per slide, like I have here, I strongly recommend you to cut that down drastically. So I'd say let's take a good sort of 10 minutes for you to edit those presentations and get ready to deliver your 5-minute presentation. And then Katie and the team will help create these 4 groups or so. And how many? We have 15 teams, so let's create 5 groups of 3 startups per team. And in your 5-minute presentation, and you have to time yourself, okay? So every team gets to present and get feedback from the other 2 teams, and then another team gets to present, get feedback. Who is the user? What problem are you solving? What is your solution? How big is the market? How are you making money? Who are you on the team? And what are you asking for? Those are the elements you definitely need to cover in your 5-minute pitch. I highly recommend you hand your phone to one of the other participants and get them to record your pitch. The best way to become a good presenter is by watching a painful video of how terrible you presented your startup. You can be your own sort of devil's advocate in that case and try to correct all those little weird tics that we tend to do when we're presenting. And remember that feedback is a gift. So when you're receiving feedback, try to shut up and listen and try to write down all the insights. If they didn't get it, it's not because they are stupid, it's because you did a poor job explaining your business. And of course today you're pitching in English, if there's any doubt about that. So you're pitching in English and try to, I mean, this is meant to be sort of a safe room here in this, we are all in this startup journey together, and the best gift you can give somebody right now is honest feedback so that they can correct whatever mistakes they're making, right? So if it's not clear what they're doing, if it's not clear why this problem is a big problem or how this feature helps the user, tell it to the other people. I know there might be some cultural things against being straight up with somebody, but in this particular context, it is the biggest gift you can give to the person in front of you. So please be honest in your feedback. But typically, what I always do in this scenario is that try to give that feedback burger, right? So positive, negative, positive, or positive, constructive, positive. So the first type of feedback you always give right after the presentation is always positive, right? Because people are very vulnerable right after having presented their startup. So start out with some green hat feedback, as I call it. So positive feedback, and then you start slaughtering them after that. When you're listening to feedback, don't try to defend yourself too much. Try to listen and write down all the insights that you get. Okay, that was a lot of information. I apologize, but hopefully some of that was useful. Any questions, comments, sort of at this point before we dive into this section? Nope. Yes? Okay. Well, let's do that in 10 minutes. So until, what is it now? It is 1:30 with you, or is it 2:30?
2:30.
2:30. Okay, so 2:30. So at 2:40, well, maybe Katie and Philippe can help just create the room or the
Yeah.
And Toby, right? So just create five different stations, and tell people where they are to be located.
Okay. Okay.
And it's sort of random which startups are where. But if you still have 15 teams, create 5 different stations, and then we do 10 minutes to just prep, and then at 2:40 we start the pitching round. And you have to be, if you can help with timing, so each team should basically just put a countdown timer on your phone, 5 minutes exactly to present, and then 5 minutes for feedback, and then you switch over and do one of those rounds for each team.
Okay.
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 Cool.
Cool. Cool.
All right, my friends, and in the meantime, I'm available here in the chat or also on the mirror board. If there anything you want to pay attention to, I will add this little section at the bottom of the mirror board, just called like questions for Henrik, and then you can just you can write it down there, and I'll pay attention to that in time.
Okay. Pitch in a group.
我可以参加，可以参加，可以对，yeah。
我们只剩9个团队，3个，这里4，那边2个，对啊，对，
可以用了，
可以，可以，
So like since everyone is here, therefore internal yes, we focus on business to business.
You can use this internally as well, and then we are direct.
Just make sure your star.
Yes.
Do the exercise.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
That's right.
So, but obviously the big gorilla in the room is Zoom right now, right? Zoom. Huge amount of traction over the past but they have so many security issues. Security issues are difficult for them. Totally different mindset. You know, their team is 500 people in China working. Don't trust Chinese companies.
We're a team 100% developed in Taiwan, though our team are very diverse. So we have a French guy, UK guy, Brazilian guy, Indian guy, Taiwanese, and as many men as female.
Yeah, we're 50% foreign, 50% players. Okay.
That's right.
It's still interesting.
Yeah. So security is the initial differentiator to be able to be the highest security on the market. Because we're using BlackBerry, we just get that highest level, but as we add more features that actually verify users as they enter conversations and things like that will actually be even higher.
So you're talking about KYC
because okay, we have a secure channel. If you don't know the person you're talking to on the other end, it doesn't matter if they're a bad guy. You can do bad things through the secure channel. So
this kind of information is owned by your company or like owned by.
It's by the customer. We have no access to your data. We have no interest in your data. No interest
we
to us
want to bring the robot
our business model is selling security, convenience and control of the business. Now the sort of thing is control as example when your staff member leaves, you can lock them out of your system.
It's just software bundle with like
we are not just BlackBerry.
We are iOS and Android and
easy to use based
robot No, but that's work. So
in our case, we use the robot we hire professional.
So also in the market, actually usually technology like B2B service, especially B2B software service.
So you have to who you are talking to in the company. If you're talking to the boss, say, hey, boss, you control all your business communication. No, because I want to what I'm going to give you something that maybe very cost effective for you to manage having the control of your business communication. Now, if you are talking to the staff, you're telling them, hey, you want to receive you want to differentiate business communication from your private communication. You want to have everything in full line into WhatsApp, or do you want to separate them? Your staff wants to have a separation. Yes.
In terms of our proactive sales approach, we don't need to build a huge sales team for enterprise. If enterprise wants to use us, that's no way. They can easily sign up. It's as easy as just going to our website, downloading the app, signing in. Anyone can join. But we're not going to proactively go to enterprise.
But right now,
however, we are partnering with BlackBerry and the likes of Salesforce integration,
so we just
like the DocuSign
have people,
and they have large sales
to sell our
solution to
customers
and sales at the same time.
They accept our solution because now they want to teach their students.
We're building, getting to the marketplace.
How to use it.
Especially
for our
solution. Right now, we have enterprise, but they have a lot of SME. North America, in Europe,
It was feedback from customers based on our previous stuff.
Maybe say that it was a previous stuff. Yes, this is the second people can accept. So in maintenance shop.
Under maintenance.
Maybe software platform.
Maybe I can just give I'm sorry for that, but maybe I can give not sorry. Maybe I can give some comment because I think about that for your business, you need something remarkable customer. I mean, as maybe it's someone that you buy, it's not competition. But if you focus on SMB, it's connected some model who creates with some name effect or like some popular region. So maybe you can just find some old school company in Taiwan, and the lack of this kind of information system, and you can maybe ask them to give you some investment, and then if they are your shareholder, and then they would love to integrate your service for their enterprise. And because in Taiwan, all money is all between. Yeah, it's all family with each other. So if one guy suggests you to another company, so
you're talking about corporate investment.
Operating investment, or even as
so we have
it's interesting you say that. We actually have planned trials with Lenovo and also
because we have the
Pacific
the robot
because
our store there
Pacific is kind of not such but for example, like Lenovo, they are tech company. Maybe they have something systems they building
can easily use the
Yes. Okay. Because sometimes I have some friends do this.
So that's the reason why my consultant asked me to not only mention the let's say you can use
but I think the Pacific Pacific is Pacific Pacific is very good.
Because before
one of my
someone's friend they have to session control. So they have a so they will
they are very good.
So
So I think maybe for me, because I do hardware, so maybe that's directly used to the big enterprise.
So we
but
can
for you,
provide something like this. If the doctor come to
someone using your
patient network, they can present once.
I think that's very helpful. Because in Taiwan, the whole money has almost has
they don't need to coordinate
with each other.
Yes, so but
it's actually that's the networking what the United States people say. They actually are sending one daughters married to the other one's son, and some sisters married to one's brothers. That's it.
This
we're both married, so I don't think
Yeah. Okay, sure. So that's for me. That's I mean, for example, like today, we connect and control the computer. For example, you using that your fingertip to click, so using the touch panel. And for me, that computer is we using my finger to connect and push the button. But we never think about if the one, for example, if people don't have the hand, or people they wearing the big heavy protective size. How can they connect or control the technology? It is one problem we find for. If we can connect with machine by more directly, I mean that through that touch maybe not as our fingertips, maybe through the more deeply things. For example, like why we feel we can move because my muscle contraction. So why we can not use muscle system to connect to control?
Already
you can move. You can just like handle the computer and the counter service as you can do naturally. So it's what we do. We do biosensing technology just put on my wrist. And this is my part. For example, if the one skill is one skill is usually for example, I will do that every time I reach because I can use my hand to just control the slide, and I don't need holding any any just monitor or remote controller. I can just use my hand to control that. So what I said, we are the future computer interface. We are just saying that we are the specific part, but ultimately it is very brief demo video. I just did that. So it's what I think. What the problem we find in the industry, the problem is the user. Then maybe big and protected. You can see tons of application and the service on the website. But if you looking about how they connect and control this industrial services, then you should pay attention. It's not true. In the industry, it's very dirty, dangerous, and high noise situation. You cannot using a bare or that's the touch panel to control our service. We using our service, and we sensing a muscle vibration signal with the iPad and the hardware technology. So it's very simple for our system structure is we just using our wristband and connect with our API on the station. That's just simply upload everyone's information into that ERP system. So we do the things that people never do before. We make the operator's head connect to the system. And the traditional way is we machine and with the signal system. And now we can everyone we can connect to the system. It's one of our application features. So that's we just quick talk about competitors. And our competitors are using also electrical system, I think, but people still will. So the market is not a walk or wet conditions. But also technology. Actually, this company, our main competitors, not just acquired by Facebook in the 1 billion license. So it is why our technology making because that's our competitors using the electrical system, muscle electrical, but human skin is not electrical situation. You will sweat. The electronic resistance will change by temperature, humidity, because I using vibration. And on the other hand, the advantage of vibration is because it is for universal application. So I can say that. So is the rubber band on my finger any? Oh no.
This is the next generation prototype.
Just like it is. Even though we are our margin rate, this is very simple. So we use it because we one thing finance. I want to show where the quality of the presentation is usually should have yeah, we all know the have this company, and we separate by the robot, by our software, and we have some customers. It's why I like to do big success. Thanks on the industry area, we have the culture solder from Google, from Siemens, from UO, and the Wistron Group. And for the gaming, or as the content Asian area, we have contract with Sony and the Sega, some game company in China and Japan. Sega doing now, they are doing street game. How to say that? It's not home game console. Yeah. It's not a home console. They do home console, but they do okay right now. And they have some arcades using those very special computers. If you go to Japan, they're doing that. They're using floating cards. Let me show because the factory they have very fast. And some stations you never ask operators maybe take some ball like things and pick for the component and check the front side to the back side back. But you know, because they're very fast and sometimes the operator will skip some movement. So this is what I say. They usually put out the operator's list and to connect to calculate how the people's hands do. It's what I say. So it's tradition. Everyone says industrial 4.0 or smart factory, but today's factory is not smart because the people, the 90% operation factory to design. So why cannot we do that? It's possible.
I guess but you are saying that
yeah, still in that thing. Because that's the pricing, the price strategy is because my competitors, they're selling, for example, like I can show you about the competitors. For example, like this one, this competitor is from United States. They're selling, yeah, put it here, and it's It's not $400. $200, around $200. And the $400 is this company. It's from Israel. And this company is from Japan. They're selling this product in $350. So I think B2B and the back sales $180 is sizable. So I selling like that.
So I really want to change the way
I totally my cost.
to be able to do
something, including the
try and keep the slide count short.
Because that's what we do is
pictures, 20 slides, 30 slides, that's something acceptable
for scale up. I should say it's very traditional way, contract by contract, such as B2B area, I think there's some the other kind of effects. People, some that's very remarkable. That's what I do today. So I could Google and Siemens and Foxconn.
And I meant this for the entire presentation was actually a even a solution, how we I would like to remove as much text as possible and only one directly into use and a lot of that has to be
forget the momentum. It's a very traditional way. Company by company, contract to that.
I'd like to. Are you selling it to companies like us?
Yeah, if you want to.
I want to finish. Does it work on Mac? Does it work on Mac? Does it work on Mac?
It's work on Mac. It's work on but it's maybe cannot do like that because that's okay. It could not open this kind of visible, but you can make contact. I usually less of they don't using the just using if you do the American style, you can use it. I just because I no, I just I just close the spatial font from they have special font for combination, you know? Sorry. Yes.
We're moving.
Because I done their part, so that's cover the font, the government development, so that's usually doing this kind of thing. So usually maybe that's the actually easy. Did you raise investment? I have two angels and one VC. Two angels, one VC, and one Silicon Valley as well. So that's the angels is from one of those angels is rich family. So I think for my personal Yes, because sometimes one day there, one of my angel's father, angel's father's birthday, and they asked me to join their family dinner, and I go to family dinner, and one of the son was the CEO from Singapore, and the other one is the CEO of students from what's the rich family. So it's kind of because you are the pure B2B and enterprise. Yes, I think you are for this kind of aspiration. And then you open, you own your business. It's very you can try this. I mean, this kind of they love it, right? The other side the other effect also usually it's very good. Because what's the next day I can do it? Former CEO is joining my sales team. Sales advisor, that person yesterday he checked it out. They have the Wikipedia, so he can push solely to train. And if you don't know that, it's what I said, is that it will have a very good dynamic effect for the other companies. So it's easy to overcome. For you, it's usually try to approach. If you are the pure SaaS B2C companies, maybe not the B2B strategy. So, sure. Sure. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry for
well, you never do this in English. I mean, it's not your primary when you pitch to your investors, is it always in English? For your
just such as I said, in last years, I do that. It is not. Yes, my thing. I speak this part, so I know my thing. The fancy things. I do fancy the commercial course.
What do you mix with where is it?
Trying to practice that in Tainan, and in Taipei is I have I joined the one boxing gym around G Street, and I'm sure you know that because they are a little bit like the style. I mean, understand here the location, the style, a little bit like. Some gaps training. For example, but because there's one coach,
So all of them practice fencing and.
Yeah, I know my CTO.
Okay.
In the university. We know each other. On the trail, so that's I know my CTO, and we know each other over the years. We have the very strong team can be fighting with each other for 10 years. So we know each other. You don't have to fight together anyway. Yeah. I have the 18 patents for
this product, you have 18 patents?
For this, it's like my personal in US or Taiwan? US, most US, Taiwan, and China, Japan. I have several different countries. And our CTO is from the United States. Second largest design house in the world. But our CEO the family in China, so we know the hardware.
Okay.
No, I am a yeah, absolutely good. But how many people outside of your 14? Total team. By one software engineer and one hardware engineer. But the hardware engineer is still also well known. So I think doing the hardware or hardware stuff, it's very easy to do that in Taiwan compared with
That's the whole culture of
This kind of product seems to make some like cool or sexy videos about how it functions.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one. Absolutely. I think lay all down the page. So set up.
没有，这是它的那个曝光，它曝光是
What about Xbox Pro? Yes. Actually, that's what I work PS5. And it's the video game. And if what I want to show is stable and effective,
But there are also factory conditions, like maybe oil drilling, like it's a very vibrating environment or noise like
We tried that. One of the, for example, what I see is the high output. So one of
When I demo maybe that's so you
I give you my business card. Maybe you give me an email.
Yes.
We meet.
Meet you in the kickboxing.
So you do that also? In my use. Oh, all right. Okay.
Yes. Because I carry my babies.
Oh, okay.
That one is for video conference. That one is for YouTube live streaming. So different we can stream in multiple camera, into 7 camera.
I believe, I totally believe.
Live streaming is okay. Live streaming is okay. It's connected. Yeah, that one streaming is still going on. Okay. So that's what we are recording.
Yes, I wanted to know.
The video today is from morning to afternoon session. Yes. But it's not open. It's only if you have the link. So I think we share the links to the chat group. You can subscribe our channel so you'll be able to see that recorded.
Yes, that person recognize you.
So it's a very useful tool in the future for business companies,
does he have any connection with investors? Does he have some knowledge can help us improve the product? Because most entrepreneurs, they want recognition. The product is so great, you become the next Facebook. It doesn't matter. So the first 5 minutes, I mean, what's your goal in mind? So for example,
and with this battery docket,
to Curtis,
the camera, you can
what
run
are you
almost
doing?
6
What
hours.
resources do you have? Then I decide what I want to tell you before I tell you anything, because your time is limited. Yeah. But anyway, you guys are doing a good job. Congratulations, you finished that.
There was a right at the start of the price of the love is very important. 1 week later, we were dead.
Yeah. That's why we try to close this round early.
Is it taking a lot of time?
Oh, this round took us around 5 months.
How much was that round?
20 minutes.
That's like our next basically.
Oh, okay. Okay, because my company is only 3.5 years old.
So your C to A to B very quick.
No. I raised the A round. I skipped the C because I don't want to talk to those angel. They don't really know what to do. Oh, I have good cash on both. I have dry powder. What do you want? When you talk to a professional investor, the way they talk to you, you learn a lot. When you talk to nobody, they don't have really good experience. Their intellectual level sometimes is
okay, not so high.
Not so high. And also, when you try to give worship to that person, it causes you a lot of trouble. When you get a wrong person on your board, you suffer, trust me. And
is that what happened in your previous company?
I found 3 companies already. This is my third company.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried. Before I started this company, I worked in London and Citigroup investor banker. Then I moved to Singapore. I worked with the conglomerate Lipo Group. We have 5 listed companies in Singapore, 6 in Hong Kong. So I done 2 IPO. So we raised a lot of funds. I used to sit on the other side of the table. Yeah, you need to be very cautious and aware. What is the goal? Why you are doing this? Anyway.
Sorry, I run you out of the basic part. I was in your
We're getting back. Okay, Eric, back to you.
Righty. Very good. Okay, so you got to pitch and hopefully got some valuable feedback. How did that go? Good? Good all around?
Good. It's always interesting to see how when you're so focused on a project, you miss the glaring issues that that you should be saying, but because you're so focused on the project, you just don't see them.
That's the thing, you know everything about your company, and that universe it's so obvious to you as a founder, many of these different elements, that when you talk to a new group of people, you just don't even think about mentioning that. So that is, that's why it's really useful to just have these like friendly meetings first, and also when you start raising funding, the first couple of meetings you set up should be with those investors that you don't really care about that much. And just look at those meetings as trials, where you're just refining your pitch. Every time you talk to a new person, you get a new set of questions, and you're going to refine your answers over those meetings. So it is very much like a numbers game, like the more you pitch, the better you get. The better your answers are, and at the end, it's going to be this very well-run machine. And your challenge at that point is to not sound too mechanical, but to still have some personality left in it. But it's hard. I mean, after 50, 60 pitches, you're going to get pretty tired of listening to yourself and telling the same story with an equal amount of enthusiasm built into it. Okay, cool. So here at the end, I want to be able to leave some time for some Q&A at the end as well. But I wanted to go through a couple of things related to fundraising and sort of related to growth hacking as well. I know there are a couple of questions around that. So fundraising, we talked about that there are different groups of investors, and I think most of you are familiar with this. There's also different types of funding you can get. So you can get equity financing, where you are essentially exchanging shares in your company with money from the investors. So if you're doing equity financing straight up, it's also called a priced round, because in order to give out equity, you need to have put a price point, essentially a valuation on your company. Then you can do debt financing, which is very risky, because if you take a loan from the bank, even if you failed with your company, you still have to pay that money back. And that sucks. And then there's convertible debt or convertible notes, which is a very popular type of financing for very early stage companies, because you don't. It's a lot faster to get processed through. And essentially, what that means is that initially it's a loan, but it converts to equity in the next round. But typically at a discount, so at a 10 or 15% discount, because of course the early investors take more risk compared to later investors. Let me know if you want me to elaborate on any of this. I think you seem like you're familiar with most of these things. So you have friends and family, angel investors, venture capital, then you have crowdfunding, and you also have competitions, right? That can actually be a good way of getting funding. It can also be an enormous distraction if you keep just focused on various types of competitions. Then there are a couple of interesting infographics that I've included up on the website. We can go through these if you like. I'm not sure if it's too basic for you guys, but essentially there's some pretty cool infographics on how funding works. So here you can sort of see the breakdown of what it looks like with you, and at the idea stage you have 100%, then you get at the co-founder stage and you split 50-50. Now you have a friends and family round where you raise $15,000, and you now reduce the amount of equity that you have to 37.5. Your uncle gets 5%, and then you have a stock option pool. Stock option pools, are they pretty common in Taiwan, or how's that?
It's actually not legal under Taiwan law, so you have to incorporate abroad and do a local subsidiary.
Oh wow, so it's really hard to give employees equity?
No, there was a way around. Actually, you can give, but the employees don't want. They prefer having higher salary than having options. I don't know if anyone has the same issue here.
Because of tax?
No, most employees here don't want the long term, they want short term cash. They're not gambling.
That's one of the things
Actually, you can do that in Taiwan. You can do that because if you using the other kind of company structure, you can do that.
So have employees started asking more for this, or it's not so much?
Well, usually when we, at least in our situation, is the candidates that we meet, they don't care so much about the options, the stock options and so on. They prefer having a higher monthly salary. Give them 10K, 10K, 20K extra per month is more valuable than some shares that may turn into money later.
Not materialize. Yeah, but of course, as founders, it's something to consider, right? If you can start being some of the pioneers who change this culture, because obviously having employees that have real buy-in in the company will create a different level of incentive and motivation.
But I have another idea. Actually, some company giving 30% options to the employee, to the team. Like my company, when I start a company, I give 30% free. There's no option. It's just a free. 技术股. I think that a lot of people knows in Taiwan. 技术股, you get 30%.
30%?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Option is another idea. Stock option is probably a second, third round if you are raising more money. But initially, when you start a company, actually, if you would like to encourage the team to, contribute more, actually give them free at the initial stage.
You give a standard salary, higher salary?
A salary is the same. Salary is no changes. You give them 30% free. I mean the team. Okay, it doesn't need to reduce their salary. Yes, that's an incentive. I think that's a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. So if they leave the company,
well, you can say by 2 years. You have a right. If you stay for more than 2 years.
Do you have vesting? That was another question. Like, is it pretty common to have a vesting schedule in Taiwan?
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, you all have vesting schedules.
So you say you only get the shares after staying for 2 years?
Yeah. Yes, say 2 years, you get the
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
2 year vesting schedule.
Yeah.
Is that for employees? What about for you as founders? Do you have 2 years or 4 years or 6 years?
Oh, you go to 6 years?
That's long.
Well.
I mean, actually, friends of mine who are serial entrepreneurs, they know it takes time, so they just impose a 6 year vesting schedule on themselves, just because they know it's gonna. They want to stay in the game for it.
I know a lot of companies they do financing fundraising. You have variations, so you put that as the stock option. But actually, in Taiwan, you can do another way of fundraising. Instead of calling a valuation, actually you can ask a certain percentage reserve for a team. This is the same things. Okay, so I know startup. I've been in this second startup. My previous startup, we do the all day, all way. But the second startup now, a lot of accelerator, a lot of mentors, a lot of VC, they try to give different way. But actually, Taiwan, you have both options available. Yeah.
Okay. Are you all familiar with vesting and what that means?
Yes.
Any? No?
Yes.
Anyone shaking their heads? Can't really see. Well, just in case, I have a very simple slide. So essentially what vesting means is that instead of owning your equity on day one, and this is a great thing to do for all entrepreneurs to protect the business. And I've been in a situation where we had people leave early and we had just given them the equity and contract up front, and it was a giant mess to try to buy that equity back and figure it out. So I strongly recommend that if there's just one thing you take away from this workshop is that you should have a vesting schedule, ideally at least 4 years. So essentially it means that if you're 5 co-founders, you each have 20% for whatever miraculous reason, you will get those 20% not on day one, but over a 4-year period. So typically with a 12-month cliff, so if somebody leaves or gets kicked out within the first 12 months, and this can go for employees and co-founders, they leave with nothing. After 12 months, you start vesting on a monthly schedule, and you can have different types of accelerated vesting terms if you get bought out and things like that, but otherwise, you essentially, in increments every month, you vest your stocks. So after 2 years, you will have vested half of your stocks, meaning 10%. Right? So nobody can take those 10% away. If you leave, you're going to leave with those 10%, but the remaining 10% goes back to the company somehow. Right? So that's a great way to protect everyone in the business, to make sure people are in it for the long haul. It takes time to build a valuable company, so people should not just get their stock on day one, because then they can leave. And there's no way for you to raise money if you have 50% lying around in like passive equity for an early stage company. That's very dangerous. So vesting, just do it. Okay, good. Any other comments around that from some of the more seasoned folks?
May I ask one of your experience that my previous startup, and I just give away like too much equity to the raise funding and to the teammate. So at the end, my share is less than 50. So how am I going to still control this company when my share is lower than 50? Or another scenario is, how do I, if it happens again, how do I have a good design of the equity share?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite common after 2 or 3 rounds of funding the founding team usually don't have a majority equity share anymore. That's quite common. I mean, if you as a founder, after at the time of an exit, that the founding team still owns like 30% of the company, and that 30% is split between 2 or 3 founders, that's very common. That's pretty good. But hopefully, it's 30% of a very large pie at that point, right? So what I guess the question was, what can you do to control the company at that point? Well, at that point, you will have a board of advisors who have certain types of control, but you can write into, if you really want control of the company, you can write into the terms of those investments that you retain some kind of control. And also, if you're giving away shares, not all those shares have to be voting shares. So there are different ways you can sort of write your way around that. But it's quite common that at the end of the day, you will give up majority ownership, and what you need to do at that point is to make sure that the board members that you appoint to be on your board are your allies. Like, that is very important, because if you don't have allies on the board and they're not loyal to you, that's when you could potentially get fired from your own company, or you could end up having a number of situations where you're constantly fighting about strategic direction.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, there's another infographic here. Again, it's also up on the site. I don't think I need to go through it, but it sort of talks about how valuation works, right? That there's different elements that goes into deciding what valuation you might get in your company. So at the early stage, it's team, it's traction, it's the product. But then if you have prior success, that can also dramatically impact the valuation. And depending on where you get the money from, that also impacts your valuation. So an incubator or accelerator takes somewhere between 4 and 7% or 8%, right? $400,000 valuation, maybe giving $20K. Y Combinator, it gives you about $100,000, higher valuation, so it still ends up around 6-7%. Angel investments, not uncommon to put in $100K for a 9 or 10%, depending if it's pre-money or post-money valuation for $1 million. And then super angels come in higher, and then micro VCs. And 12 to 18 month runway, so you have enough money in the bank to run some experiments. And it is very taxing to fundraise, so you don't want to do it all the time, but on the flip side, you don't want to get too much money at a low valuation, so that's the constant sort of trade-off. The later stage, there are multiple things that go into this calculation on your valuation. It depends on the traction. If you have revenue numbers at that point, depending on the industry, it can be a multiple on your revenue. And at that point, you typically will have some options in and out. Yeah, and there are scenarios of what might happen after hire acquisition, or maybe in something. Cool. Let's see. Yeah, so investment rounds, I mean, this really depends quite a lot. I have friends who have raised $6 million seed round, but that is probably a bit uncommon. I think the average seed round in the US right now is around 1.2, 1.25, something like that. So these numbers really vary a lot. But yeah, pre-seed, seed, Series A, B, C, D, and IPO. Make sure, of course, to calculate or to align with the investors on whether you're talking pre-money valuation or post-money valuation. The difference can be seen here, in case you're not super familiar with that. Like, if you're talking a $1 million pre-money valuation, that means that the entrepreneur will retain 80% equity after the investment of $250K. If it's a post-money valuation of $1 million, you only have 75% of the business left after the investment. So make sure you understand that and don't talk past investors. When it comes to growth hacking, just a couple of tips and tricks on that. This whole image here will make sense in a minute. I'm going to show you a video from Dave McClure, one of the founders of 500 Startups. But growth hacking is probably something that most of you do, different types. I mean, the situation is that marketing has changed dramatically over the last sort of 10, 15 years, right? Where now it's mostly an exercise for engineers versus creative marketers, or it's at least a combination of creative designers and copywriters and then the analytics department that can run really effective experiments. So you're using different types of virtual tools to very accurately estimate and track what seems to be working, and then you do more of that. Many companies, however, seem to make a mistake that they look at the wrong metrics, or they look at the wrong things. They just look at traffic, and then what kind of users they have and how much money they're making. Whereas reality is, there's a lot of oh, where is the slide? Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that gets missed in the in phase 2 or 3. Essentially, that's where the magic happens. We want to know what are the things that makes this traffic convert into users, that converts into paying customers, and ultimately profits. So they came up with this lean marketing framework called AARR. So the acronym spells R, and hence the high framework for marketing. So acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue.
In terms of like find a job, learn to cook, landing page, copy, graphics. Not that important, remember the first 3 points. All right, so if you were to build a dashboard of these things, here would be the first things. Acquisition focus. People that visit the site, 100% conversion, everybody who comes to your site is on your site. Figure out a value, guess at it. Acquisition, a lot of things, people bounce off your site because they didn't mean to come there. Don't measure those folks, those aren't the people that you're really looking at. Activation, happy first visit. What does that mean? X number of pages, Y seconds, Z clicks. Things that you would like to get. Email, blog, RSS sign up, or an account profile sign up. Figure again what those percentages are, focus on getting that to happen. Next stage, this slide fucked up, but retention. So how do I get people to come back? Measure important criteria are email open rates and RSS open rates or click-throughs. And then a rough metric for repeat visits, maybe 3 visits in the first 30 days. Again, choose a rough metric for what you think retention behavior is and then measure it. This should be the 4th slide that was previously about 4 referral metrics. So try and find out the people who are at least referring other people to your site, and then also, if you can, measure the people who actively do something when they refer. So massive referrers are not as poignant as people who do refer and those people then join. Lastly, revenue. So 2 things to measure, minimum revenue and then break-even revenue. So if you can get those 2 metrics down, those are important things to kind of figure out. All this forms a sample dashboard that you could look at. From a marketing perspective, what are you trying to do? You're trying to design multiple marketing channels that work for high volume, high conversion, or low cost, but you're trying to measure deeper down the conversion funnel. So you're not measuring effectiveness at the top when they come to the site, you're measuring how effective they are at the lower levels of conversion. If you're in product, don't just build shitloads of features. That's wrong. Look at your measurement, your conversion channel, your hypothetical way that people are successful. Spend 80% of your time tweaking features, 20% of your time doing new feature development. A/B test a shitload, measure for conversion improvement. Rinse and repeat. If you're the founder or CEO, less, not more. This is not about doing shitloads of metrics. Choose 5 metrics if you can. 10, certainly no more than that. Measure and iterate. Focus on those conversion improvement boards. Most important is hypothesize a customer life cycle, right? That's your job, is to guess what you think people are going to do, measure against that. Different types of metrics, quantitative, qualitative, comparative, and competitive. If you can figure out a tool that helps you give you some information in each of those categories, that's really helpful. And I'm done. Thank you.
Please welcome Dave McClure.
Okay, my friends. So I hope you were able to hang on there. I know it was pretty fast, and I know some of it is a little outdated, but there are a lot of golden nuggets there, so I chose to include it after all. Any thoughts on this? Did you capture anything from that? So what are high volume channels, what are low cost channels, and what are high converting, highly converting channels, right? So it talks a lot about how you want to make sure you measure all the way through the funnel. There's no point in spending additional marketing dollars on getting more people to come in at the top of the funnel if you haven't made sure that those people actually convert all the way down. So if you're looking at this sort of funnel mechanism here, like people come, yeah, this is like beautiful graphs here. People come into your site, they start using it. We want to make sure they can retain those customers, that they refer other people. Like the cheapest way of getting marketing is getting your customers to refer to other customers, and then finally find a way to make money. Let's see here. Good. So acquisition, right? So how do people learn about your site? How do they become aware of you? That's something you need to strategize, figure out, well, how do they get into the top of the funnel? Of course, we want to have the funnel be as broad as possible, but again, there's no point in spending money on search engine marketing if you're not able to activate those users and convert them from visitors to users to ultimately customers. And if you want to make sure you can retain those customers, they find value in your product, they keep using it. If basically people are just leaving your product here, you need to fix that before you start putting more fuel on the fire up top. Otherwise, it's going to be just a very expensive way of losing all your money very quickly. And then, of course, finding ways to make money, and definitely think through what are ways you can really harness that referral mechanism. Like, what can you do to incentivize people to promote your product for you? Are there smart ways? Sometimes it's just by telling them, and they just haven't thought about telling other people about it. So it's just like a small little nudge. It's free to do, and it can have pretty good impact. So thinking through acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referrals is quite a healthy or useful sort of strategy session. And then in terms of what you measure, there are something called vanity metrics versus actionable metrics. So vanity metrics are all those things that sort of makes it look good, and you look at what are the results of the engine, but it's hard for you to sort of make any informed decision based on those metrics. So the actionable metrics are more about what is it that drives the engine forward and helps you improve. So an example here could be vanity metrics are like number of followers, total users, Facebook fans, blog views, whereas it's better to estimate lifetime value, how many shares do you get, what is your acquisition cost, what is the engagement levels, and number of active users, right? So you see the difference in these types of metrics that you're using. Yeah, so instead of just looking at one-time unregistered users or monthly subscribers, like look at what is going on in the middle of the machine here. Okay, I'm not going to measure this too much. Then, of course, when you start having some more serious traction, you can start doing cohort analysis, where you essentially look at all the people who signed up in a specific week or specific month, and then you can compare that with other cohorts over time, and that will give you some pretty good insights on how you're actually doing in terms of improving some of these things. Because you've added a bunch of features, but if it's not improving your retention numbers and revenue numbers, maybe something is wrong. And you have just been adding features for basically no particular reason. A/B testing is, of course, useful today. We are privileged. We have access to so many very powerful A/B testing tools. What are some of your favorite A/B testing tools? What are you using in Taiwan at the moment?
Google Optimized.
What's that?
Google Optimize.
Google Optimize?
Yes. I use it to A/B test the web design.
Are none of you doing that? Are any of you like actively doing a split test on a consistent basis? Not so much. Okay, so that might be one of the things that can have a massive influence of your conversion numbers. Essentially, what A/B tests, what that means is that you don't just go with your gut feeling on what is the right copy, like what is the right amount of text and the type of text on your website, or what is the best picture to put up on your website, but essentially you will test it instead. And it turns out that having an orange background instead of a green background can have a dramatic influence on the conversion rates, right? Sign up now versus join today. It's the same message, but just that slight difference can maybe mean a difference in conversion rates by a couple of percentage points, which could mean hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on your balance sheet. So it is worth spending time on testing the messaging that you're using, testing your ads. Of course, if you're using social media platforms to market your products, many of those platforms have A/B testing tools built into them. And you can use things like unbounce.com and instapage.com are some of the tools that I've really enjoyed using. They actually have a built-in dashboard into the tool. So once you've created a beautiful looking landing page, a beautiful website for a new product or whatever it is, or just for a specific campaign, you basically build that out and then you just click copy, and now you have created a version B. So you have a version A and version B, and when you then launch this campaign, the unbounce.com will automatically direct half of the traffic to version A and half the traffic to version B, and then you can see the conversion numbers in comparison with one another. You can also create a version C and D and E, and you can direct traffic in whatever percentage you want to each of those versions. And then you have now quantitative data to help you make the right decisions on whether you should have a big picture and a very little amount of text, or you should have a long explanation on your website, because all of the things are just gut feelings, but usually our gut feelings are off by a lot. So I strongly recommend you to A/B test a ton, because that's really the only way to get to the right price point. Also, some of you were asking about, well, how do I figure out the right price point for my product? Well, A/B testing again is the solution to that. You launch a campaign, but instead of launching it with just one price point, you launch multiple versions and you check out the conversion rate. And the shocking thing is that sometimes you can actually have a higher level of conversion at a higher price point, because people, there's this like perception that when you pay more, you also get a higher quality. So this high quality price perception correlation can actually drive people to be more likely to pay for a more expensive product. Okay, last few comments here on this. So throughout history, there are tons of examples of companies that have been successful in hacking their growth. Hotmail was probably the very first company that did this successfully. And the way they did this was that they included this little snippet of text in the footer of every email that you sent through Hotmail, and you could just see the viral growth through that. I mean, it was phenomenal that after a year and a half, they had 12 million users. That doesn't sound like a lot today, but there was only 70 million internet users at the time, so it was insane. And that was essentially because every time you received an email from a Hotmail, it says, "We love you, get your own free email account at hotmail.com. Other examples with Tinder, they had this very smart recruiter, her name was Whitney Holmes or something like that, who essentially would go to college campuses, and then she would go to all the sororities, where all the girls are essentially in these sorority clubs, and then they would convince all the hottest girls to sign up for Tinder, and And then afterwards, she would go to the to all the guys and show them this app where all these attractive young women were now using Tinder. So that was a way they used for initial attraction. LinkedIn, their way of doing growth hacking is essentially like to have extremely good SEO. So people want to have LinkedIn be they want to own the LinkedIn profile because that's the first thing that pops up on Google. So that's one aspect of their campaign, apparently. Airbnb has done a number of things. One of them was that they used essentially the smart hack on Craigslist, which is a website where you can sell used things. And they would essentially cross-post on Craigslist, but then when people saw the ad, they would click on it and then they would go to the Airbnb platform afterwards. Because initially they didn't have any users, so they would post the listings on Craigslist and they would essentially have this automatic feature. So this, again, was something that a marketer would never have come up with, but because they had some really good engineers, they were able to basically look at the code on the Craigslist website and hack into the system so they could automate this process of cross-posting to Craigslist. Another thing they found out that really helped spur their growth was to get people to get more professional level pictures on the website, and that had a tremendous impact. Dropbox very successfully has done some growth hacks around giving away free space in exchange for you sharing Dropbox with your friends. And I remember when I was in college, I was doing this like crazy, and I got, I don't know, definitely like 15 or 20 of my friends to sign up for Dropbox because every time they signed up, I got additional free space. And that was great as a student. So things like this, it doesn't cost you a lot of money. So basically think about, well, what are some of these growth hacks you can do for your business? How can you incentivize your users, your customers, to recommend your company to more great potential customers out there? And we are almost out of time. So 2 more cents on networking, and we'll stop with some Q&A. So on networking, I just have to mention this so you don't make some of these mistakes. Like for those of you on LinkedIn, that's great. For those of you not yet on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn right away. Start linking up with the brilliant people in this room, because today they might seem very accessible, but they're not 5 months from now, but they could still be very useful if you knew where they worked. The great functionality in LinkedIn is that you can search throughout your LinkedIn contacts, so you can always find out who you might know at XYZ company. And you can see your first, second, and third degree connections who work at those companies, and that is a very useful feature because then you can ask for an introduction or you can ask for help from that company, right? So I'm going to share this here. So here is my LinkedIn, for example. Right, so under connections here, so I'm just short of 4,000 connections, and under those you can go in and you can see that when you link up with somebody, well, under LinkedIn, for those of you not familiar with this functionality, I can search for people, jobs, or companies, right? So if I need to know somebody who works at Facebook, I search Facebook, and then I can search under people, and then I can say, okay, well, how many people of first degree connections do I have who work at Facebook? And I have 360 people who have some first degree level at Facebook, right? And then I can find out, well, great, here's the director of product design at Facebook, so she might be useful. Or if I need to talk to somebody in a different department who's a software engineer, I can maybe reach out to Lynn, or somebody who's maybe one of the investors, whatever it is, right? So it's very useful. I can search for locations and work in the current company and so on. So very, very powerful. What you always need to remember is that, for example, here I have 214 unanswered invitations, and I sort these regularly. But you do get a lot of requests on LinkedIn, and my rule of thumb is that I basically don't add random people. I only add people that I know, because my network is my net worth, but there's no point in for me to have a gigantic network if I don't know these people anyway. I can't ask for a favor. So the way I look at my network is that I will only add people to my network if I know I can ask them for a favor. If I can't ask them for a favor, there's no use for me. But the point that I wanted to mention here was, when you reach out for somebody to link up with them on LinkedIn, I can see if we have a lot of people in common here, but the best way for you to improve your conversion rate on LinkedIn is to add a message. So, for example, Jelly Wang here, she included a message, but I can see that she's like some kind of hiring person. We have a team in Ukraine. That's great. I don't need a team in Ukraine, right? So, but usually people that are more likely to connect will add like a personal message. But again, something generic is like, I noticed you got a distinct vibe, blah, 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 right? I mean, okay, I don't need somebody to help me become visible, right? So, but for example, I think what I had in the slides here, some couple of examples of good examples. So here they're just all blank. I can't see them, but if it shows up with a message, it's like, hey, Henrik, we met during this workshop in Taiwan, or hey, I've looked through your website, I like one of your videos, I would love to talk about, teaching entrepreneurship in Indonesia, then I'm much more likely to accept that, and then we can have a conversation. So what I highly recommend you do is that you add this little message. It's like, hey, Henrik, it was good to meet you earlier. I hope you had a productive visit here to Deakin in Australia. Please accept my invitation. Right, great. Now I remember I met Jamal at this date. So of course, yes, great to meet you. Thanks for linking up, right? So just remember to add a little message when you link up with people. Then it will help you remember where you met those people later on, because you have a message history, and it will make you much more likely that those people convert into contacts. Okay, we sort of went through this email introduction thing. Just make sure to ask your head nicely when it comes to that. And when it comes to co-founder agreement, I've met a lot of founders who don't have one. That will be my final advice. Write a co-founders agreement where you pencil out what are the roles and responsibilities. Make sure that all IP is assigned to the company, not to one person in the startup. And then make sure that you have a good equity ownership description and investing schedule. Okay, that was it for me now, and it's 4 o'clock in Taiwan. And I would love if we could go back to the Miro board here for a second, just before we leave. And the Miro board link there is still tinyurl.com/Taiwan tinyurl.com/Taiwan 0603. And if we could just meet in there for a second. So I'm happy you can continue to access to the board here, and if you write more questions here, I will make sure to get to those. I recognize we didn't have too much time left for Q&A now, but I'm happy to address those, and I'll basically answer those tomorrow. And we got around to, I think, most of some of these things in Painstorming, but if there's some of that where you would like some additional resources, if you can post it on the question section, basically down here at the bottom, questions for Henrik, then I'll check in on these tomorrow and try to see if I can be helpful on some of that. Otherwise, yeah, I'm happy to take a couple of questions right now, unless you have a hard stop, or unless you are so sick of hearing listening to this crazy Danish dude, you just want to get out of here. Any final questions? Nope. Okay. Well, in that case, I would like if you would do me one last favor. On the Miro board on the bottom right corner, you can see there is a link to a very short, like 3-question survey, just to get your input here on this format. This is the first time we've sort of done this in a virtual format, but with you in person. So I'd love to sort of get your feedback on how this is working and what we can do to make this even better in the future. And is this something you would recommend potentially to other people? So there's a link there that I hope you will click. Again, the link to get into Miro is tinyurl.com/Taiwan0603. There's a short survey. Okay. And while you're filling that out, are there any? I'll send this link out to you, KT. Maybe you can send it around. Actually, if you can CC on an email to everyone, I have a couple of additional resources I'd like to just pass around. And then we're all connected on the email, and hopefully we are soon connected on LinkedIn as well. But any sort of any verbal sort of feedback on the session today? Was this okay in a 6-hour format? Listening to a guy on a screen, or was it terrible? Or what's your impression?
The Miro experience is quite interesting. It reminds me a bit of Figma. But yeah, doing this on the Miro is quite, let's say, innovative for this first time.
Great. Any other thoughts and first impression on using Miro this way and using this Zoom setup? And also, you can also comment on the contents, like other things you would have wanted me to touch on, or redundant.
To be honest, it's been a lot of information all at once, so I think a lot of us are perhaps a little bit brain dead right now. But thank you, it's a great, to be honest, there were a bunch of stuff that clearly most of us had already seen, but it was great to see it all introduced and put together properly by somebody who is from there, because all that we see from Taiwan is what we read on websites or bits here and there. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm glad you found it valuable. I mean, you as a group it seems to me that you're quite well read on the right type of websites. You have already found valid resources, so a lot of these concepts were probably not like brand new to you, but I'm glad to hear that it was useful to sort of see it at least in this structure. And please, use me as a resource going forward if I can be helpful with introductions or with feedback, or you just want to, bounce an idea off me or whatever. I'm happy to just be available to you going forward.
I will definitely take you up on that for the next version of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. KT, any final words? Or
I guess we just thank you very much. It probably 1 a.m. your time, right?
Yes, it is.
Wow, it's a marathon course for you.
I'm glad we didn't.
Have you done that before? Like.
No, I haven't.
Wow, this is our first time with you. Okay.
No, it's the first time this late. But I'm gonna be doing more of these now because I'm starting to get requests from corporations as well. They want me to do it in like Middle Eastern time. And that's also like, the workshop was supposed to start at like 3 a.m. and I was like, guys, that's not happening.
Okay. I'm not sure if just want to say something. No, thank you, Harry. Joseph.
Okay, thank you everybody. And,
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.